those Stanley Cup playoffs are in full swing, and it's been good. It's been good so far. Frank, you were in attendance for game 1.
Oh yeah, in attendance.
And
saw Harm. It was great.
And what'd you think of the game?
I thought it was a pretty methodical win, all things considered, for the Canucks. I thought they were incredibly patient. I thought they stuck with what they were trying to do in light of Nashville trying to force them into some uncomfortable territory. And I thought it was a win that really showed me a lot about the maturity of this team.
Before we sort of dive deep into the game, I know you've been to a lot of playoff games around the NHL. The atmosphere at Rogers Arena, how do you think it stacks up compared to the other playoff games that you've covered?
I would say it was excellent. And yet, I think Canucks fans have another level.
That mic's broken.
Yeah, I see that now. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Tips. Good work there.
So another level do you mean for Canucks fans?
Yeah, why not? It gets, just like the players, they bring the intensity level to level, round to round. Why wouldn't Canucks fans?
Any predictions for this series?
In terms of volume?
Well, what did you say? What was your prediction to start it? Because I said Canucks in 5. That was my prediction. Feeling good about it.
I said Canucks in 6.
And you decreasing that to 3, 4?
Look, I think there's probably going to be a hiccup here or there for the Canucks. I think that's probably pretty standard. Not everything goes swimmingly, and there is another team involved that obviously has a big say in what happens. I feel pretty good about 6.
What adjustments would you like to see the Nashville Predators make in game 2?
More pushing the pace more, and not speed wise, but there was a little bit of them sitting back and forcing the Canucks to chip and chase and to dump and chase. And that's, you guys know, but like, I'm not telling anyone, that's not Vancouver's game. And so the fact that the Canucks were able to kind of wade through that a bit and then assert themselves, I'd like to see, if I was in Nashville's room, I'd say, why don't we dictate to them how we're going to play instead of sitting back, sort of waiting for them to pick through what we're doing? Maybe they feel like this is their best path to success. In saying all that, really, when you think about where the Canucks are, and I mentioned the maturity, and I mentioned the idea of this team learning lessons, which has been really impressive, there's another one to learn here, in that I think what's right in front of them and on the table is they can make this a somewhat short series. You don't need to go the distance here. This is a grueling first round series in terms of travel. This is by far the longest distance that anyone in the NHL has to travel in the first round. It might even be, when it's all said and done, all playoffs.
Yeah.
So do yourself a favor, give yourself the best possible opportunity. And again, not saying foregone conclusion that they win, but just saying, if they do, give yourself every opportunity to make life easy.
From Vancouver's standpoint, why do you think that Lindholm, Garland, Joshua line was so effective? Obviously, not only just offensively, but also against that O'Reilly line.
Probably some similarities between O'Reilly and Lindholm and how they play. O'Reilly's obviously more physical. Lindholm is a little bit more cerebral in how he views the ice, but he's also really talented defensively, that his awareness is strong. His positioning is always excellent. And I thought that game, so like, let's take a step back and let's walk through the game. Miller and Pettersson don't get on the score sheet. Lindholm gets an absolute gift from UC Saros, probably one that they're not going to get like that the rest of the series. And a big shot in the arm confidence-wise for Lindholm. But you called it, or the show is Dakota Joshua Mania. I mean, those are the types of contributions that you must have. They're not nice to haves, they're must haves when it comes to the playoffs. And they've gotten a huge, chunk of that to start round one.
What did you think of Elias Pettersson's game? Obviously kept off the score sheet, but what did you think of his game?
I thought he was better than okay, but not outstanding. I thought, and honestly, probably until the third period, do you think Quinn Hughes was noticeable?
I think he wasn't maybe his game-breaking self, but
the puck wasn't on his stick nearly as much in the first two periods.
Yes, but the Canucks, I felt, did dominate in terms of offensive zone time. Like,
sure,
all his shifts were spent, I thought, in the offensive zone.
I'm not knocking him. My point is, like, if you consider all these things that lined up, no Miller, no Pettersson, Hughes wasn't a dominant force. Like, those are all really good signs to come out on the other end with a win.
Absolutely.
Canucks in 3. Okay, hard.
Just stepping away from the game a little bit, big picture. Like, I wrote a piece up at The Athletic earlier last week, sort of talking to a lot of executives, getting them to anonymously sort of rate playoff teams. And one takeaway that I got was, for the most part, people aren't really buying the Canucks yet as a true cup threat. Yeah, they look at them as a team that, they'll probably beat Nashville round one, but they aren't really true believers yet. Is that a sentiment that you get as well? And do you think that positions the Canucks well as sort of underdogs and embracing this mentality of, well, the league doesn't fully respect and believe in us yet?
I do think there's a part of the Canucks that's feeling that. What I would say is that's probably a really honest assessment of how the rest of the league views the Canucks. But I have to tell you, seeing that up close and personal, game one, I came away super impressed at the patience that they showed for all the reasons that I mentioned right off the top of our segment. The fact that they didn't try and open the game up when trailing 2-1 in the third period, that would have been an easy card to play. There didn't really seem to be any panic, and that part for a team that, look, we've had this conversation multiple times this year on this show, the idea that the Canucks have to go through heartbreak in order to get to where they want to get to. No one is going to take them seriously as a threat until they have a deep run and they fall short and they learn how to win. My question is, I don't think that's written in stone anywhere. I think we would all agree that it's probably a more likely than not necessary path. However, what if some of those lessons that this team needs to learn, they've been learning them since training camp? Because you go through that room and it is methodical in terms of their answers. They are a machine. And I don't mean in winning press conferences. They've actually been talking about being comfortable in 1-goal games. When you're in their room, there's a sign. It's shaped like a diamond and it says meet pressure with pressure or something like that.
No, that's it. That's a talkidism.
That is those types of things. Like, what if they've actually been learning those things all year long, that they feel really good about being in a situation like they were on Sunday night, first playoff home game in 9 years, knowing people like Harmon Quads are going to be crying and or raising the temperature or panic level had they lost that game. Now, all of a sudden, it feels different, right?
It does.
It's one game, but it's like, okay, sigh of relief. Canucks are on the board. Now what's the next step? And before you get all ahead of yourselves with like the talk of what this can be, yeah, there's going to be some really good teams in front of you. But I think, and I've said this from the very beginning this year, the Canucks are really uniquely structured in having some of the best players in the world at the 3 or 4 most key positions in the sport. And when you have that, you have a chance to win.
Canucks in 3. Okay, Frank, I wanted to kind of touch on that a little further because you bring up learning those lessons. I almost think it goes back to even last year. And this was a conversation I had last of the season with Tyler Myers telling me about that speech that Patrick Allvin gave them about how we have so many good players in this room, but you don't know how to play as a team. Myers told me that conversation happened at the start of last year when Bruce Boudreau was still the coach. Alvin was coming in there and saying, like, you guys don't know how to play as a team. Tocchet comes in, teaches them how to play as a team, and they hit the ground running in training camp. It feels like those lessons started even last year when they brought Tocchet in.
Well, that's because they did. And that was a big reason why, if you look around the league, I was advocating for a team like the Ottawa Senators. With all due respect to Jacques Martin, bring in your permanent coach in March. Bring him in February, because you may say the season's lost, but I think there's a lot to learn so that when your players set foot in training camp, there's not this feeling out process of, oh, does he like this or that? Or how does this work? Or what's his temperament with this? You know, all the answers to those questions before you even get on the plane to come to training camp. That part is big. But then, you know, it's funny you mentioned training camp, because I was thinking about this last night. The day I was here for camp in September, that was the day that Rick Tocchet had kind of publicly slapped Dakota Joshua.
Yep.
And I was here in practice. He was on the 5th line. And Rick Tocchet had said he needs to pick it up. I know that he played 70-some games last year, but there's no guaranteed spots here, and we need to see more, essentially was the message. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty close. That's not a button to push. That's a coach, to me, that sees potential and is trying to draw it out of him. And everyone gets motivated in different ways, but all of a sudden realizing as a 5th round unsigned pick that was a Group 6 free agent, that all of a sudden his career is flashing before his eyes, like that grabs your attention. And then you see him go on to have what, you know, would have been a 20-goal season had he not gotten hurt.
And he's going to make a lot of money this offseason.
It's a life-changing season.
Absolutely.
It's a player that went from being a fringe NHLer to being a $9 million contract player.
Yep.
When you look at how the Canucks recovered from a special teams perspective, particularly the PK, did you notice anything in terms of adjustments or what they were maybe better executing that allowed them to kill off the 3 penalties after O'Reilly scored?
Nothing particular. They did a good job limiting shots. I mean, that was a big thing. I wouldn't say that any one facet of what they did stood out to me. Part of it was just, and you can feel this in the building, is like almost like even though there was the wave of penalties that had gone against them, they didn't really seem to be rattled by that. I don't know if that makes any sense when I say it. Like, their body language was really good. I was like, okay, yeah, we're just going to go kill another penalty. You can tell when teams start to tense up, and the Canucks down with penalties, all those things. Like, there was never really any part of their game where they were like, yeah, we're in one now. Like, I didn't see that at all.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.